Maybe you've already seen my anime commercials that I've animated for bigger companies. And maybe you've wondered while watching them, how does he do that? Well, today I'll show you how to animate completely from scratch with simple examples for beginners, step by step. Alright, now, before we start, animating is really complicated if you've never done it before. If you can't really draw digitally yet, you'll have a really bad time here. Don't worry, I've made a video on where I show in a really simple way how to get into digital art, including everything you need to know. If you're still a bit unsure about digital art, maybe take a look at that one first. Alright then, let's go. My name doesn't really matter to you guys anymore, and we will take a look at what you need to start animation. DrawlikeaSir. Let's go. Let's start with software. I use Clip Studio Paint. There are some free alternatives like Krita, which are pretty nice, but if you already know that you'll be doing a lot of animation later, trust me, you want Clip Studio. I'm not getting paid to say that, and I'm not sponsored. Two of my friends, Chris and Ihabo, both work at Toei Animation on One Piece, and they and all of their co-workers also use Clip Studio. If you want to know what kind of features this software has, I explained all of that in the beginner video I mentioned earlier. Animating is an insane amount of work, and this app has some features to make it a lot easier. Now, when it comes to tablets, it really doesn't matter what kind of tablet you use. You can even use one without a display. That's how I work most of the time at the moment, and it works totally fine. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's always about the artist, not about the tablet. Now, in this video, I'll be using the new Wacom Moving Pad 11. Wacom is sponsoring this video, and they sent me their new mobile tablet that I can use in this video. Honestly, it's one of the most highest quality tablets that I've ever used. Usually, I work with stuff that's a bit more budget, so getting my hands on something that's this luxurious was actually a really nice change. You can already tell by the display, it doesn't reflect at all. It's completely matte, even in sunlight. And it's also fingerprint free, so it doesn't smear when you draw. The setup is super simple. No installing drivers or something, it's just like starting a new phone. And you actually get 2 years of Clip Studio Paint included for free. I personally don't need that since I already use Clip Studio, but for you guys, that's a really nice bonus. So throughout this video, you'll see me working with this tablet. But if you think it looks interesting already, check out the info box. I've already linked it there. Also, you can win this Wacom Moving Pad 11 on my Instagram at the moment as part of my current Draw This New Style challenge. There's still time to participate. All the details are over there on my Insta. Alright, let's get started. Open the software and create a new document. In Clip Studio, you don't have to set up much. There are great presets that you can use right away. Just switch to the animation tab and there's already an easy preset for full HD. When I do professional animation, like the commercials and trailers you've seen before, I usually work at double the size, so I work in 4K. But depending on your computer or tablet, that might be a bit too much, so for the basics, let's stick to full HD. Another super important thing are your FPS, so your frames per second. That simply means how many images will appear per second in your animation. More frames mean smoother animation, fewer frames mean choppier animation. But we will talk about that later. The important number right now is 24 FPS. Please do not change that at all.
So if I enter 60 FPS, it's gonna look a lot better, right?
No, I told you 24 FPS is
How about 5,000?
No! Always 24 FPS. It doesn't matter if it's Disney or anime, it's always 24 frames per second maximum.
This is a work of art.
If you ever see a video on YouTube with 60 FPS in the title, that's just AI interpolated frames. So this is bullshit. So let's confirm, and if you're now seeing this blue kind of rectangle here, that's basically your camera. Everything inside of this is going to be visible in your animation later on, everything outside isn't. It's pretty useful for camera movement or drawing perspective. Now, if you don't see a timeline at the bottom, go up to the Window tab and there you can enable a timeline. In my setup, the timeline looks pretty clean and pretty narrow, but yours might look kind of ugly and cluttered. Most pros go into that little menu right there and simply turn off the preview thumbnails with the option None. This gives you a lot more room to animate, especially on a small tablet. Now at the beginning we do not use any regular drawing layers. Instead we are using animation layers and animation folders. Regular layers are not going to move. Okay, that was a lot of setup, but it's super important. If you don't already have one, create an animation folder now. And inside of those folders, you'll put your individual drawings, also called cells. Now let's create our first cell. It works just like a regular drawing layer, but it's made for animation. Now, if you scrub through the timeline, nothing will happen yet, because we only have one drawing so far. Let's go to frame number 2 and create a second cell. A number 2 appears right in the timeline there. Now let's draw something on that new cell. And now, if you play it, you'll see some movement. Now you got that, but of course there's gonna be a lot more to it. We'll get more professional later, don't worry. Okay, now if you take a look to the right, you'll see that all of your cells are listed inside of the animation folder that we've made. They work just like regular layers. You can adjust opacity, you can fill them, you can transform, rename them, whatever. But Clip Studio is pretty smart. If you rename your layers, it is going to remember that logic and is going to continue it automatically for future cells. This is going to be a game changer later on. Alright, now that you know how to create an animation, let's make one together using a more professional workflow. I'll start completely from scratch again. So let's go for a new animation folder and I will color it blue. That's for my sketches. And for the sketch, I'll just draw a little Pep. That's the mascot of my manga series. Just draw something really simple for now. Or maybe just copy what I'm doing. Alright then, next cell. But before we go any further, we have to turn on the onion skinning. Otherwise, you're not gonna see anything. This onion skinning is gonna show the drawings before and after the current frame. Without them, animating is gonna be completely impossible. If you wanna, you can change their colors and opacity in the settings if you like. But yeah, now we can continue drawing frame by frame by frame by frame. Wait. Beginner mistake incoming. Don't just start drawing like crazy. If you're gonna animate like that, your drawing will look like it has melted halfway through. There are two animation techniques. There's straight ahead, when you just draw one frame after another without planning. That's what you just saw. It's actually great for drawing effects like lightning or fire, where a bit of chaos actually looks good. But for characters, humans or animals, you don't animate like that. Instead, you use pose to pose. That means you plan your poses beforehand. In this case, I actually want Pep to look upwards. So I need to draw the final pose first, where we want him to end up. Animation in general is a ton of planning, even more than with regular drawings. Now, your first and your last drawings are the most important ones. They are called your keyframes. Okay, so both of our keyframes are drawn. Let's ink them with black lines. You probably know this process from drawing digitally. You just lower the sketch's opacity, and then you can focus on the line art. Now let's make our new folder for our line art. Don't forget, for animations, we always need a special animation folder. Regular folders are not going to move. Now you'll notice that you will end up with a bunch of animation folders and animation layers, so for better organization, I'll mark this one black, so I know this is the one where I'm inking. Now create a new cell and trace the sketch with black lines. Important, you want to use a pixel pen, and you'll find them under the marker section. Now, here's why. Later, when we'll have to fill in every drawing with color, the pixel lines are detected perfectly, pixel by pixel. But if you use a regular brush, there's always some kind of white left between these lines. And now imagine having to fix that for hundreds and hundreds of drawing. Yeah, no thanks. Drawing with pixelated lines is actually the industry standard. Every anime studio works with flat colors and pixel lines before the next department polishes everything up. Now another tip, set your pen stabilization to maximum. Yes, I know it is going to feel a lot more laggy, but in exchange you'll get a lot more smoother lines. And if you don't want to draw by hand at all, you can just use the line tool. Just make sure to turn the anti-aliasing off, so the lines stay pixelated. This works really well, sometimes even better than a pen if you're used to it. Just make sure of the most important thing, your lines have to be pixelated. Okay, from here on out it's going to get really complicated, because now we need to add shadows and highlights as well. So what I'm doing in my layers panel is turning my current cell into a regular folder. Inside that new folder you now have your black line art, but you also need one more layer for shadows and highlights. You can just use a regular layer for that since it's not gonna move anymore. Put this new layer under your line art and start making your shadows and highlights. I'm using blue for shadows and red for highlights. For better clarity, you can even fill in these areas with the paint bucket if you want to. I know all of this is very confusing at first, but this workflow is going to keep you from losing track later on. Also, now you understand why pros always have these colored lines in their animations. They are marking shadows and highlights. For this you can use any color you want, by the way. Red and blue are just the industry standard. And now here's the cool part. Clip Studio remembered that process that you just used. So when you move forward and create another cell, it remembers your folder setup. So it already created a new folder with the same structure, layers and everything. So you only have to do that setup stuff once. And now we do the same thing for our second keyframe. By the way, when you need to erase something, use an eraser that's also pixelated. It should be obvious, but it is worth mentioning. Okay, keyframes are done. You can delete your original sketch now. At this point you can take a look at your timing for a final time before the real work starts. How long should this action take? Don't worry if you have no idea how long you should make all of this. It takes a few days of practice to develop a feeling for timing. But right now you have two keyframes. The start and the end of the animation. And now we will draw the in-betweens. But how many? One for every single frame? Now again, beginner mistake incoming. A lot of beginners think the more drawings, the smoother the animation. But that's not necessarily true. Here's an example, an animation with half as many drawings, but it still looks silky smooth. If you're now confused as to what you should do here, here's a helpful rule. Pros usually work with 24, 12 or 8 frames per second. That's called 1s, 2s and 3s. Because you can draw on every frame of your animation. You can only draw on every second frame. Or on every third frame. There's no right or wrong or better or worse. All of these can look good. Even fight scenes are sometimes animated on 3s. They can still look awesome if your drawings are dynamic. It's not about how many drawings you make, it's about how good and how well timed they are. Drawing on ones, meaning every frame, is something only giants like old Disney movies did. With these movies, every drawing was a masterpiece, so of course this looked amazing. But for this tutorial, I'll animate on twos, meaning I'll add one drawing every second frame. So let's draw our first in-between. There's 1, 2, and bam. This is where I'm going to add another cell. So let's draw our first in-between. Thanks to the onion skinning, you can already see your first and your final drawing. Now, it's up to your imagination to figure out what the middle drawing should look like. Let's take the eye for example. The left eye is the first frame, the right one is the last frame. We're still at the beginning, so let's start near the left eye. Now same thing goes for the beak. The lower beak is the first frame, the upper beak is the last one. Now we're drawing closer to the lower beak since we are still at the start of our animation. Even with simple character drawings, this can get very confusing. Even for me. But don't worry, your in-betweens don't have to look perfect. Even if one of them is a bit off, you usually won't notice in the final animation. Now don't forget your red and your blue markings, and also don't forget to keep them on separate layers. Alright, last thing that's missing is color. Each folder has your black line art and red and blue markings. And now we will add a new layer for color. I know I could have added these layers earlier, but I thought that might be confusing, so we are adding them now. Now you could manually pick and fill colors each time, but there is a more professional way to create it, and that's a color set. If you don't see that window, again, you can just activate it in the Window tab. I've made a color set for almost all of my characters. That way I can just pick the colors instantly without searching for them every time. You can save your colors easily with a right click and then add your active color that you have picked out. For big animations with hundreds of frames and colors, this is going to save days of work. Now for filling your animation, we are using the paint bucket. When animating, I recommend turning off settings like tolerance and any other special options. The only thing you should keep on is refer to other layers. Now fill in your flat colors, no shading or highlighting yet. And now finally hide your red and blue markings. And then you can fill in your shadows and highlights. Now frame number 1 is officially done. Now comes the rest. I know what you're thinking, you're probably still annoyed how pixelated your lines look. Don't worry, Clip Studio has a smoothing filter for that. But be careful, once you close this app, you can't undo this filter anymore. So make a backup of your animation first, just like I'm doing right now. And then you have to merge each of your folders individually by right click and merge selected layers. And then you can apply your smoothing filter. You'll find it under Filters, Blur, Smoothing. Now personally, I don't like doing that inside of Clip Studio. I prefer other softwares during compositing later on, but compositing is way too advanced for this video, so let's stick with this simple option here, because this way you don't need to download any additional software. And that's it, the final step for the basics of animation. You can now easily export your animation as a video. Just go to File, Animation Export, and then Movie. If you want to export all of it without a white background, export it as an image sequence instead. I will gladly show you more animation techniques in a second part if this video does well. For now, you've got all of the basics that you need to start animating. Use this to practice timing, keyframes, perspective, dynamics, basically what we've been doing together in my live streams these past few months. Okay, now, if you want to get better at animation, this step is what you need to focus on. Coloring and line work won't make you better, but actually drawing will. Try creating your own animations. Try to experiment. Even if it looks dumb at first, my first attempts also looked awful. This can take days or weeks, you only learn it through practice. You can also try redrawing movie scenes. You could do it with keyframes, you could do it straight ahead, it doesn't matter, the important thing is to get drawing and to get animation practice. Because even something simple like a head turn requires you to draw a head from multiple angles, since you have to draw all of these in-between steps. So here's a little example of how I would animate a head turn. First, I draw the starting and the ending positions, just like I showed you earlier with my keyframes. Now obviously both heads should have the exact same proportions. It would be weird if the eyes are suddenly double the size. You can easily compare them side by side. For example, I noticed the skull that I drew was way too big, so I quickly fixed it. Your keyframes have to look perfect, so better correct them now. You will also notice that a front and a side view of the same face look totally different, just like in real life. So how would you draw the in-betweens here? Well, in this case, you add a third keyframe. That would be a 3/4 view. That makes everything much easier. And again, I measure everything, from ear to chin, eye positions, everything. Because I need to keep all of these proportions consistent. This makes creating the in-between drawing way simpler. And this is exactly what you will learn when you practice. How to measure things, when does it make sense to add another keyframe, and so on. There are tons of other drawing techniques that I would love to show you, so maybe I will actually make a second part of how to animate DrawlikeaSir someday. If you're struggling with drawing faces and stuff, I did make tutorials on that, so maybe check that one out. Thank you guys for watching my other tutorials, and I'll see you guys next time.